Thank y'all for being here. I'm Elizabeth Anderson. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Lunar Lab. We're a UX design and product strategy agency based right here in Birmingham. We help people create software that's intuitive, user-friendly, inclusive, ethical, and profitable. We help make development more efficient and less risky. And we make software beautiful too, but that's the easy part. We are also a public benefit corporation, which means that we're a for-profit company, but we're also legally required to consider social good in all of our daily work and business operations. So I've been in tech for a long time, and I've done a ton of roles. I've done release management, project management, product strategy, leadership. I'm running my own company now. And during that time, I've worked on everything from really exciting products that benefit society to some kind of boring products that make people's day-to-day lives better. And I've also been asked to work on some real sketchy shit that I'm going to tell you all about in a little bit. So all of those products, from the feel-good work to the sketchy shit, involve people. We are all of the ones who are creating the software. And not to generalize, but I think that most of us in the tech industry are optimists with big imaginations. And that's what's allowed to us to create, to innovate, and to dramatically change the world. In today's world, we are exchanging information and ideas faster than ever before. In just a little over a century, we have gone from the Wright brothers barely surviving their first attempts at flight all the way to the moon. We have gone from Hello World to ChatGPT. And we can do all of these things that our ancestors never even dreamed of doing. So without that vision of a bright future that we all share, we wouldn't have been able to create all of those things. Our enthusiasm about making the world a better place is what makes this industry so great. But sometimes it goes wrong. And as we know, with great power comes great responsibility. With the pace of tech advancements moving faster than ever, we're also encountering a lot of new ethical dilemmas that we need to confront as a society. And with the technology playing an increasingly significant role in our lives, we've got to consider the ethical implications of what it is that we are creating. So I don't want to bum you out, but it hasn't all been sunshine and roses the whole time in tech, right? Sometimes stuff goes wrong, even if it's unintentional. So how do our best efforts go wrong sometimes? Well, there are these products out there right now, today, that are actively causing harm. These are products that invade your privacy. They're collecting your data without your consent and selling it to bad actors. These are products that are designed to be addictive with the goal of keeping you in the app as long as possible, even if it hurts your mental health or your relationships. Some of these products have allowed cyberbullying so bad that it's led to suicide in adults and children. And other products are perpetuating discrimination in our society, enabling bias and harm. Some products even get people killed. Recently, TechCrunch reported that alcohol recovery startups Monument and Tempest shared the data that they collected about users with advertisers without consent from the app users. These companies promised that the data was private, and so people shared really personal information. You know, medical information, insurance information, details about their alcohol consumption. For years, they were actually selling that information to third-party advertisers, which is a complete violation of people's privacy. In another example that I bet y'all heard about, Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen revealed a few years ago that the company had conducted internal research showing that teen girls became depressive and suicidal after using Instagram. It would be really easy to wave our hands and say that these young girls already felt bad because of negative social comparisons in real life. And I can confidently say that it is really hard to be a teenage girl. It's tough out there for them. But that's not what the research showed. The research showed that these girls became suicidal after using Instagram. So Instagram's engagement-based algorithm was continually pushing images and messages that caused these girls to spiral deeper and deeper and deeper into depression, anxiety, and body dysmorphia. These are young, vulnerable children who developed eating disorders, anxiety, and low self-esteem. Some of them died. And according to the whistleblower, not only did the company turn a blind eye to their own internal research that showed a problem, but they continued to target teen girls in order to maximize their profit. Okay, one more example. In 2016, ProPublica reported on a commercial algorithm that was being used by judges and parole officers to track recidivism rates, which just means how likely a person is to commit a crime and then commit another crime. So ProPublica's analysis, which was later confirmed by several independent research teams, looked at 10,000 criminal defendants and compared their predicted recidivism rates with the rate that recidivism actually occurred over a 2-year period. What they found was that Black defendants were predicted to have a higher recidivism rate than what happened in reality. In fact, the predicted recidivism rate for Black defendants was twice as high as the predictions for white defendants. Meanwhile, the white defendants were mistakenly predicted to be at a much lower risk for recidivism than they actually were. The overall accuracy of this was only about 63%. That's a huge problem. These are algorithms that are used to decide who goes to jail, who goes to rehab, who goes free, how long or short somebody's sentence should be, how much additional surveillance they should be subjected to. They change the trajectory of people's lives. So when we have algorithms like this, the people are treated as data points using racially biased data, which means that they aren't given a fair chance for rehabilitation. When an unfair algorithm is used to determine outcomes, those outcomes are also going to be unfair. So those are some really huge examples where people's entire lives were negatively impacted. And maybe y'all aren't working on a healthcare app or social media or predictive policing. Maybe you're working on a banking app or a sports app or accounting software or library catalogs. I used to work on enterprise software for corporate actions processing, and if y'all want to take a nap later, I can tell you more about it. The point is that it does not matter how tame of a product you're creating, there are opportunities for harm to slip in. So let's say that you're building just an everyday form. I think we've all built a form, we've all used a form. What could go wrong, right? It's just a form. Well, if you have made it this far in the talk, you know what I'm about to say. A lot can go wrong when you're building a form. First of all, if you're collecting any data at all, you're gonna have to think about how the data is being stored. Is it secure? Who can see it? How is it being used? How long is it being stored? Will it be used later to manipulate people? Do the users entering the data know that somebody else might see it? Is anybody selling the data? Is there anything that could come out that would be harmful about people? Can they change it later? Can they skip questions? Are you asking for people to disclose something that is potentially illegal that they could go to jail for later? Even the questions themselves can exclude people. So if you have a form and it only allows names that have 3 characters or more, you're excluding anybody with only 2 characters in their name, which is very common. If the form requires people to share something that they don't feel comfortable sharing and they choose not to complete it, you are excluding them from using your product. A really common issue that I see is where there are required form fields asking for gender and they have options like male, female, and other. Using the word other can reinforce exclusion and make people feel unwelcome. So even something as mundane as a simple form can do everything from making people feel bad to violating their privacy, all the way up to getting people thrown in jail. Okay, so how does this happen? Every single one of the products that I mentioned earlier is made by actual people. People are the ones that are designing these products. They're coding the products, they're deploying the products, they're marketing the products, they're talking about the products on podcasts, they talk about them in their internal meetings and their shareholder meetings. And depending on the company size, this could be dozens of people or hundreds of people or thousands of people who are involved in every single step of creating that software. And do we really think that all of those people were actively trying to hurt others? No. And I mean, yeah, there are probably some absolute fucking villains out there who do not care and will definitely hurt other people for a profit. But I am willing to bet that not everybody working on those products is evil. I have worked in tech for a long time, and I know that there are lots of kind, wonderful, generous people in this industry. And I would argue that the majority of people who work on products don't know that there's a problem with these products. Some people do know, and they even bring this stuff up. I read those research slides from the Facebook example where they found that Instagram was hurting teenage girls. The research was not presented in it was not presented in a way that says, drive young girls to suicide for profit, right? It said, hey, there's a problem and we need to fix it. It was presented really fairly and in a really unbiased way. It highlighted the problem and it correctly pointed out that it needs to be solved. But the company kept moving in the same direction. And so how does that happen, right? Even if the whole project team is full of really good people, how do these horrible software decisions make it out the door and into the real world where people's lives are getting hurt? Well, there are a few reasons that I see. The biggest one that I see is probably complacency. It's not malicious. People are not necessarily actively choosing to do things that they know are going to be a problem. It's just that, you're really tired and the project's been going on for a really long time and you don't think that you have the authority to fix it and it doesn't feel like your problem anyway and your boss is putting pressure on you and the sales team is breathing down your neck to meet these deadlines and the client's already unhappy about something and there's all these other things going on and oh my God, it just feels so small, right? And maybe you do bring it up to your boss and you see the problem, you bring it up, but your boss is the same pressures that you're facing. They've got deadlines. Their bonus depends on getting this out on time. Their boss is breathing down their neck. It doesn't really seem worth it to everybody, to make everybody mad and delay things right now in the middle of it. So I think we've all worked on a project like that. With all of those pressures, it's really hard to stop and think about the negative consequences that might come from the product being created. And sometimes it's not even ignoring the problem, it's just not taking the time to think about whether the product will create problems down the road. Like there's no process for thinking about it or it's not part of company culture, and so it just doesn't happen. The second problem that I see is just a general unwillingness to see the problem. So we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but it happens all the time, especially higher up in the organization. This is where people plant their flag in the ground and they say, I am creating this product for good. It is going to change the world and nothing bad is ever going to come out of it. Like if you just say that, it will magically be so, right? Like you're making this pronouncement and people's lives will be better. And this one's really difficult to resolve because people just do not want to believe that anything about their product could cause any harm. They've got this great idea, it's going to change the world, and it really is a great idea most of the time. It has a ton of benefits, and it has so many positive benefits that people refuse to believe that it could cause harm. What could possibly go wrong? The third problem I see is fear. So this can manifest in a couple of ways. One is fear of speaking up, like what if your boss gets really mad at you, or what if your team gets mad at you? What if they say it's silly? What if they don't do anything about it? What if the client doesn't care? What if you get fired? It's really scary. The other way I see it manifest is fear of being responsible. So I used to know this guy who would get super upset if anybody apologized to the client, even if the company did something super, super wrong, because he thought that if you apologized, you would be accepting legal liability. His view was that you should do anything possible to avoid responsibility for anything ever. So tough line, nothing sticks. Point is, nobody's out here trying to build a doomsday machine, but if they do build a doomsday machine, you can bet that there were a lot of points along the way where it didn't have to happen. Okay, so who's actually responsible? Is anybody in here a villain? Anybody? Okay, see me after class, Thanos. All right, anybody trying to build a doomsday machine? Are you building a doomsday machine right now? Okay, stay with me then. I'm not trying to build a doomsday machine. I saw a lot of hands that are not trying to build a doomsday machine. We're not trying to get people killed or tank the economy or make racist software, right? We're all just trying to create some cool stuff and make a decent living. But at the same time, we're also all participating in creating tech that makes the whole world work. So every single one of us bears some responsibility for what we create, no matter whether you architected the whole entire thing or if you just added one line of code. If we touch it, our names are on it, and we have a responsibility for it. So I'm going to tell you a story about a guy who did not take responsibility for his creation and what happened. That's right. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. If you have not read this book, you totally should. There are going to be some spoilers here. So the story goes, Victor Frankenstein is this incredibly brilliant scientist, and he creates this living sentient being out of just some spare body parts that are laying around, right? So that's amazing. Like even ChatGPT is not sentient. But at no point during this process of stitching these body parts together did he stop and say, what is going to happen if I make this creature? He creates this thing, and he's just like, oh, that's gross. So he just basically leaves the creature to his own devices, and he abandons it. So this creature that he's created, this guy, he's got a brain, and he can think, but he has also just been born. He does not understand anything about society. And Victor isn't any help. He just chickened out and left. So predictably, the creature goes out and murders people. He doesn't know any better, right? Victor didn't tell him anything about why he shouldn't murder people. He has no clue. So eventually the creature starts learning things on his own, and he realizes that people are generally as disgusted by him as Victor is, and that's pretty upsetting. It really hurts his feelings. So he begs Victor to create a companion for him. But Victor refuses because he's horrified by his creation. So this leads to more deaths, more murders. Victor dies. Nobody's happy here. It's not an uplifting story. So even though it is not a feel-good novel, what I really love about it is that I think its message is really relevant for what we're doing today. So in Frankenstein, Mary Shelley explores what it means to be responsible for our creations. Victor is brilliantly and enthusiastically taking on this incredible technological feat, even by today's standards. But he never stopped and considered any of the consequences that that action would bring. He just ran away. He abandoned his creation. Sure, the creature is sentient, but Victor never helped him understand society or why murder is bad. So who's responsible for the deaths? Is it the creature who was literally holding the murder weapon? Or is it Victor who created the murder machine and bailed? People have been rolling that around for like a few hundred years. And where does that leave us when we're thinking about our own tech creations? Sometimes we're creating this new technology that can ultimately cause harm, like in the examples that we talked about earlier, or like with Victor's creature. Who's responsible for the harm? If we create technology that's biased or discriminatory, who's responsible for perpetuating inequality? If we create technology that doesn't protect people's privacy, who's responsible for putting people at risk? And if we create technology that results in people dying, who is responsible for those deaths? I would argue that every person contributes to that technology shares some of the responsibility. So we created these monsters, and we have to own the consequences. And I'm not arguing that we should not be innovative or creative. Far from it. I am saying that we should be more innovative and creative than we are today. We need to keep innovating and keep inventing and keep creating, but let's do it in a way that we can feel good about, in a way that actually creates the societal benefits that we all want. Okay, so what can we do about this? It is not impossible to do something about this, and it doesn't have to make our tech less innovative. It doesn't slow us down. It doesn't decrease the quality of our work. In fact, it makes our work better. So let's talk about how to be responsible stewards of our creations and how to ensure those creations don't cause harm. First and foremost, we have to prioritize ethics in the decision-making process from the very beginning. From the earliest discovery conversations all the way through new feature requirements for a mature product, we have to always think of the ethical implications of what's going to happen if this product goes out into the world. So at my company, Lunar Lab, we have a conversation about ethics in the first discovery session for every single product that we design. And it is really, really hard. We sit in front of these really excited, starry-eyed startup founders who just want to change the world, and then we ask them how their app's going to hurt people. And I'm not going to lie, it's a really awkward conversation. Nobody wants to think about how their baby can hurt people. But having the conversation is necessary and important because when we design something, we feel that we've got some responsibility for its impact. So we dive straight into this incredibly weird conversation and ask these questions like, how will this technology impact society? Are there any cases where part of this technology is biased, discriminatory, or unfair? What areas of this app are the most vulnerable to exploitation? And if someone evil were to use this app, how could they hurt people? You're all really awesome and very ethical people, not you. So that's going to be hard to answer. You're going to have to pretend to be a horrible villain for a minute. But the more problems that we can identify at this stage, the more that we can take safeguards to prevent these issues. For example, if we are working on a fintech product where we know there's a risk of fraud, we can put additional fraud protections in place. If we're working on software for something like hiring where a lot of discrimination happens, we cannot make racist in people less racist and sexist. But what we can do is we can make it harder for them to be racist and sexist when they're in the hiring process. So a few things that we might do are putting friction in place that just makes it harder for them to do it. Maybe they make it harder to identify a candidate's race or gender during the hiring process. Or we create reporting to identify racist or sexist hiring patterns. Or we use AI-powered suggestions within the software to minimize bad hiring practices and help clue some people into their unconscious biases. We are all so good at innovation in this industry, and there's a lot that we can do if we flex those creativity muscles. Second, and I promise you I am not a glutton for punishment, we cannot let the conversation end at that first stage. After the tech is out in the world, we have to keep assessing its impact. Just like we learned from our good friend, the Scrum retrospective, when we can find where the problems are, we can fix them. When our tech solutions are on the market, we have to stay on top of their impact. That means that we have to do regular reviews and make sure that the software is doing what we are intending it to do. We need to audit it for social impact benchmarks and ensure it's not causing harm. We need to do inclusive user research to center real people's voices and concerns. When my company works with AI-powered tech products, one of the things that we recommend is to frequently review the data inputs and outputs for any evidence of bias, discrimination, or harm. It cannot be set it and forget it. These types of audits can help us identify where the problems are. And we can't pretend like the problems don't exist or look the other way. We cannot minimize the harm that's being caused. Let's say that your product has 1 million users, and you find out that 1% of the users are experiencing some kind of harm because of your product. That is really easy to shrug off, right? It's 1%. 99% of the users are totally fine with this product. Well, friends, 1% of 1 million is 10,000 users. That is 10,000 real, living, breathing people who are being hurt. And these are not edge cases. These are somebody's friends, neighbors, or family members. And that brings me to the third way that we can do something about this. When we do these reviews and research and we find the problems, we have to take responsibility for fixing them. As we learned from our good friend Maya Angelou, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. If you thought that those early stage ethics conversations were awkward and weird, wait until you identify a problem that your software has directly caused. This is not going to feel like a normal bug fix. It is going to feel weird. It's going to feel bad. There are some people at your company, really good, nice people who are your friends, and they're going to want to ignore it at best or cover it up at worst. Because as we learned from our friend Upton Sinclair, it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. The struggle is real. But the second you see evidence of harm is the second that you've got to do something about it. You cannot be like Victor Frankenstein and just run away, right? That means that more harm will be caused. You cannot be like Facebook and ignore the problem of teen girls being driven to suicide because that just puts more blood on your hands. If there is a problem, you have got to be willing to recognize the problem and do something about it. If you see a toddler pick up something that's going to hurt them, you take it away, right? If you see a hazard in real life, if there's a big hole in the ground and people are about to walk into it, you put something up around it. You warn people. You fix it. And if you see a problem in software that could lead to harm, you got to fix that too. And finally, sometimes we have to say no. We can refuse to do work that is harmful. This is the hardest way, but it's also the most effective. So earlier, I promised you that I was going to talk about some real sketchy shit that I've been asked to work on, and here we go. Years ago, I was asked to be involved in a project for an organization that did Christian missionary work in a part of the world where Christianity was illegal. In fact, it was punishable by death. The project would have made my company a whole lot of money at the time. The organization was trying to do something that it felt was right, which was spreading the word about religion. A lot of people at that company that I worked at the time supported that goal as well, which made it feel like a really good project to them. But I and several other people at the company said no. And not just once, we said no over and over and over again. This was absolutely not about the religious part. I am not here to debate religion or anybody's views on Christian missionary work. Whatever you think about Christian missionary work, what we were opposed to was creating a database of people who could get killed for being in that database. If the wrong people got any of the names in that database, real human beings would die. And this is not a hypothetical. People would lose their lives. And so we said no. We discussed security, legality, liability, all the important stuff, but at the end of the day, it boiled down to the fact that we just couldn't sit with creating a product that could result in somebody dying. Even if that person was somebody on the other side of the world that we would never meet, we did not want to create a murder database. And as you can imagine, that refusal led to a whole lot of really tense conversations internally. Meeting after meeting after meeting, no after no after no. We talked to the client. That was weird and awkward. We had to tell them that their idea was harmful, even though they thought they were doing a really good thing. It sucked. It wasn't fun. And in the end, the company that I worked for at the time declined the project. And that meant declining a whole lot of money for everybody involved. Nobody enjoyed any of this. But because we said no, we did not build something that could result in people's deaths. The people saying no stood our ground, and we didn't put our name on something that would get people killed. None of us are just order takers, right? We all have autonomy to act on our own. We're all in this business because we're creative, innovative problem solvers. We are the ones holding the tools. And this is the power that everybody in this room has. Every single one of you has the power to create unimaginably innovative technologies. Every single one of you can change the world. And every single one of you has the power to choose to do so in a way that doesn't cause harm. In Frankenstein, the creature doesn't have a name. Frankenstein is Victor's name, but almost everybody uses that name to refer to the creature because what we create will bear our names. So the choice is yours to decide what will bear your name. Thank you. And if you want to stay in touch, I'd love to keep the conversation going. So you can scan this barcode to follow me on LinkedIn, and that's my email address. Reach out anytime. I'll be in the hall. Let's talk. All right, thanks.